Hi everyone, good evening. Thank you for joining us at our second webinar in the SIF Valuation program. We're just going to wait a minute or two just to let everyone filter in, and then we'll kick off and get started with what the agenda is and what you can look forward to today. Right, I think we can get started. So again, for those of you who have just joined, good morning. Welcome to our second webinar in this series in the Off-Gem Strategic Innovation Fund Ideation Program for round 5 challenges. And this one is specifically looking at how we can deliver good expansion in consumer-centric ways. And that's all about how do we put the consumer first in a nutshell and throughout our journey when we're doing innovation. We can go to the next slide where we just talk about the agenda and what you can expect in this webinar. So we're going to have an introduction from Joe Davidson from the SIF team, who will give you a better understanding of what we mean by SIF and what exactly is innovation in that sense and the funding model, etc., and the challenges, of course. We're going to touch very briefly about this challenge theme. There's a lot more information online and resources that we can provide afterwards, but we'll just give you a bit of overview of what we mean by consumer-centric and what we mean by pairing that with grid expansion in terms of innovation. We're then going to go into an expert spotlight, and you can see the expert panel here. We have speakers from Alex Buckman in ESC, we have Angela McAustin, Northumbria Water, and we have Francis Simmons, who will be joining us from Atlantic 58. And then we will get into Q&A. For the Q&A, we'll be using the Q&A panel. You can see that at the top of the Teams meeting. The Q&A panel is where you can submit your questions, not necessarily for chatting and engagement. So please just focus in on questions that you may have for the speakers or the SIF team. And then we will get into a bit more information on how we can then come together with Ideonomy. We're going to hear from Matt in a bit to submit some problem statements that you see within this challenge to sort of focus the ideation and try to find really sort of focal points of innovation that we need to tackle. A few small housekeeping rules, we can't have a webinar without that, we will be not having a chat function. So again, the Q&A is where we can submit questions. Please remain muted at all times. For the Q&A, we will not have an unmuted session for asking questions. So again, just please pop that into the Q&A panel. You can turn your camera on. That is not a problem. It won't come through the recording. All speakers are spotlighted only. And if you do have any questions afterwards, please do get in touch with us because we're more than happy to continue the conversation afterwards. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Matt Hastings, who is the CEO and founder at Ideonomy, to just give us a sort of brief overview of what to expect and how we can use this amazing tool to sort of further ideation. So Matt, over to you.
Great, thank you, Masao, and lovely to see you, everybody. So as Masao says, my name's Matt. I'm the founder and CEO of Ideonomy AI. We've been supporting Joe and the SIF team essentially to work with the community to identify really, really novel problems that can lead to truly ambitious projects that relate not just to this challenge, but a couple of others as well. So we'll be using the Ideonomy platform later during the session, and we're going to pop up a link into the Q&A so that you guys can get registered onto the platform. I'll talk you through how it works towards the end of the session, but it's basically a way where you can add in a problem title, use the Ideonomy AI to write a really good problem statement, and then publish that so that the community can view that problem statement, they can chat about it, they can prioritize it, and they can also vote to collaborate on it. So that's kind of our role today, is very simple, just to kind of help capture your perspectives around the problems. We'll get that link in the chat. Do get logged in. There's one thing to be aware of when you're logging in. It needs a 14-digit password, but don't worry, letters alone is fine. You don't need @ signs and ones and different configurations, just letters. So we'll get that popped into the chat, and I look forward to picking up again later on.
Thanks so much, Matt. And there you go, innovation and cybersecurity in the webinar already. So without further ado, let's get started. And we're going to begin with Joe, who's going to be giving us an overview of the SIF and particularly this ideation program. So over to you, Joe.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Masao. As Masao mentioned, I'm Joe Davidson, one of the Energy Systems Innovation Leads at Innovate UK, who is delivery partner for Ofgem on the Strategic Innovation Fund. And I'll talk you a bit more through the fund and also the round 5 challenges that we recently published and are here to talk about in a bit more detail our challenge 4. Can I have next slide, please? Awesome. So the Strategic Innovation Fund, I know we have some new entrants and new those new to engaging with the SIF on the call today. So a quick overview of the fund. It's a major investment program looking to drive energy network innovation with the GB energy networks. It's paid for by consumers on energy bills, and there's £450 million available over 2021 to 2026. I'll chat about the energy network users and consumers bit as we go through the challenge in a bit more detail. But in summary, so far, we now at the start of 2025, as of then, had funded over 240 projects and allocated over £230 million of that funding pot, with over £40 million of additional contributions to projects coming from partners. And over 300 different organisations have been funded through the SIF up to now. So we have a big portfolio of projects that have come through the SIF mechanism and disseminate learnings and at the forefront of energy network innovation. Over 100 different SMEs have had additional support as well from the SIF, and I'll chat a bit more about engaging with us and getting that one-to-one support and engagement with the SIF team later on in the deck. It's as I've launched a new innovation competition process, and more of that I'll get onto in the next slide, please. So on this slide, you can see the mission for the SIF, and on the right-hand side, you can see our mechanism for delivering funding. So annually, we publish innovation challenges. So we're into round 5 now, so we've had 5 rounds of those challenges. And then funding is delivered through our discovery alpha beta mechanism. So we have discovery projects, which are up to 5 months, 150,000 of SIF funding available for short feasibility studies. Those then can move into alpha, where there's a proof of concept up to 8 months in length and £500,000 of SIF funding. And then some of those move into beta for multi-year, multi-million-pound demonstrator projects, of which we've now got over 25 in the portfolio, delivering insights and engaging in those multi-year demonstrators. And that allows us to be responsive in that not all projects will move from a discovery onto an alpha, and likewise not all move from an alpha to a beta, but we can leverage and respond as insights are gathered from those projects, and that can be disseminated out. That also allows us to diversify the pipeline and address innovation challenges from different angles, different perspectives, and try different solutions to addressing problem statements, and gather evidence and insights to disseminate that within the energy network space, but also leverage that across the energy ecosystem. We look to fund transformational projects within the portfolio. As later on in the deck, you'll see how you can learn about the projects that we fund, where we are now publishing 3 times a year our project directory, where you can see what the SIF has funded, where the projects are at, and what they're up to. We also look at commercialization support. So we have a dedicated commercial function within the team, looking at supporting businesses and SMEs entering into the SIF and engaging in the energy network space and how to navigate that. And we also look to align both within the energy network space, across funding portfolios, and across Innovate UK and the wider UK research and innovation family as the UK's innovation agency at Innovate UK. Next slide, please. And that brings me on to our most recently launched round 5 challenges. So on the slide, you can see the 7 challenges which we published at the end of March of this year. And these challenges will see us to the end of 2026, allowing for longer term market direction and more strategic innovation and strong consortia to form around these challenges. There's a link to the challenge document, which goes into further detail on these, but we have 7 challenges. First one being advanced energy transmission and networks, so looking at semiconductors, superconductors, and wireless power transmission. Challenge 2 is on dynamic modelling, leveraging advanced grid simulation and optimisation. Challenge 3, which we had a webinar last week on, high energy demand point integration. Challenge 4, which we're here to discuss in more detail, is on novel technology and processes to deliver grid expansion in ways that enhance public support and deliver wider local and environmental benefits. More on that one in the next hour and a half. Challenge 5, enhanced system visibility and control. Challenge 6 is on green gas, looking at low carbon gases such as biomethane and bio-SNG. And then challenge 7 is on whole system optimization to allow whole system approaches for gas and multi-vector decarbonisation. And as I mentioned, these are open to the end of 2026 calendar year, so lots of scope for engaging around these challenges. If you've got interest, there'll be details at the end of the deck on how you can engage with us if you've got ideas or expertise that you're interested in contributing to these. Next slide, please. Across all of those 7 challenges, we have 7 cross-cutting considerations that the round 5 challenges need projects to think about. So these are applicable across any challenge, any projects that get submitted under any of the 7 challenges. So projects would need to think about these 7 themes on the slide here, on how their projects will contribute, and keep these in mind when scoping out proposals. The first one, customer focused. The SIF's funded by consumer energy bills, so projects must ensure solutions are inclusive and accessible to diverse customer and consumer segments. This is particularly pertinent to this challenge, but all good SIF proposals should be thinking about customer centricity. Skills and capability is the second. Supply chain considerations, third. Data and digitalization, particularly in embedding energy data best practice principles across proposals. Scalability and replicability, so solutions should be making considerations for how they can be deployed at scale across the GB energy networks and meet future grid needs. Sharing learning, this is a really important part of SIF proposals. So projects should be actively sharing learning from their projects, particularly in moving through discovery alpha and beta and how that learning changes, and actively disseminating that across the energy sector. And then resilience is the last of the cross-cutting themes, so strengthening adaptability and security of the energy networks to withstand, for instance, extreme weather events, cyber threats, and fluctuations in energy demand. And with that, I hand back to Masao for a bit more on the challenge.
Great, thanks so much, Joe. So as we've heard, we really are in this webinar trying to understand how we place the consumer first, the consumer center, and the consumer throughout the journey that we're trying to take in any sort of novel technologies or innovation where network and grid expansion is concerned. Just a quick pause to say that the link for Ideonomy has been placed in the Q&A, so you can jump over there, register, do this as soon as you can so that we can get started with the problem statements. If you have any issues, please get in touch with us online. Park your problem statements, keep them written down somewhere, and then we can pop those into the platform once you're fully registered and online. No worries if you need to do it afterwards. So this part, I'm not going to spend too long, just so that we can give the speakers more time to really discuss some of the issues at hand and some of the ways that they're going about tackling consumer-centric approaches. But we're looking at how we can use novel technology really in a way where, we're putting consumers first. We all have seen the news. We know that there's a lot of innovation and rapid expansion going on in the UK's energy system as we go to net zero. And with that, we need to bring the consumers on board. We need to not only have them understand the approaches that we're taking, but also feel like they're very much involved in the process. And so there are many different challenges that we have within that from an innovation perspective. It's about the pace that we're moving at. We're looking at how do we involve and evolve the consumer within the journey. And then also the trust. That's a very key element. You lose the consumers from the start, you lose innovation essentially. And as Joe has mentioned, the SIF is funded by consumers, and we need to make sure that consumers remain at the heart of that. So within that challenge, we're looking at how we get the grid development that we need at scale with consumers on board, the new engagement models that we need to have to really make sure that the nexus of all our innovation is the consumer, and the impacts as well as the value and reward that comes through that innovation is filtered right back to the consumers, whether it be through bills or their involvement or trust, all of the above. As well as we don't want to have consumers as an ad hoc thought in our innovation. Just like with network innovation, we don't want to approach networks afterwards and say, okay, we need to expand, tell us how you're going to change. It's bringing the networks involved, bringing the consumers from the start of applications, from discovery, alpha and beta, not just at beta. They need to be involved through the journey. So next slide, please. So just to wrap all of that up into a summary, for this webinar and for this challenge and for the workshop that's eventually going to come around this, again, it's about the consumer engagement. And the main part at the ending that we have in green are some of the focus areas. So we're looking at grid expansion. We're trying to understand how to scale these innovative approaches while having more advanced engagement strategies, making sure that the regulatory, the commercialization, the sort of policy mechanisms that are involved in unlocking some of this innovation are ones that bring consumer and public approaches in a bit more closely. And then we're also trying to see how we can then take the benefits that come throughout the innovation or at the end and feed them directly back, but again, not in an ad hoc fashion from the start. That should be the approach. So I'm just going to pass back to Joe, who's just going to give us a few examples of case studies of SIF programs already sort of tackling some of these issues to give you an idea of what innovation exists and where you can add some additionality through this space. Over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Masao. So yeah, as Masao mentioned, we've got a few case studies from the SIF portfolio on the slide here. But additionally, off the back of this webinar, we'll be sending around slides with further case studies, both from the wider GB innovation landscape, but also international case studies for effective consumer engagement particularly in grid expansion context. So on the slide, you can see some of the projects from the current SIF portfolio and also some previous projects. So we've got Pride, Powering Wales Newby, for instance, who are in currently beta stage. Pride's looking at a governance trial in the West Midlands for enabling local stakeholders to facilitate delivery of decarbonisation ambitions. And Powering Wales Newby looking at developing a digital twin of the Welsh energy system to enhance local visibility of system challenges and accelerate decarbonisation plans of the Welsh Government. Across the portfolio, you can see from our project directory, which will link at the end, everything that the SIF has funded way back from round one. So you can see which networks have led projects in which areas, and also cut the portfolio in a number of sort of key themes. More of that in the last slide, and how you can see everything that we've funded across the SIF timeline so far. In terms of some key gap areas and where we're sort of focusing the two themes under this challenge, this challenge has two main themes, so scalable technical innovations for grid expansion and community engagement and public acceptance strategies. Some key gap areas from the higher level gap analysis is looking at integration of local social value into planning tools, scalable low impact solutions and low disruption solutions, and community-led design and decision-making models are some of the sort of key gap areas from the high level gap analysis. And it's important to think about complementarity when developing new proposals and looking to address areas of novelty and where you can build on and leverage learnings and insights from previous proposals. So more on that at the end of the deck. But that's enough from Masao and I. We are now moving on to our expert speaker panels. So we've got Dr. Alex Buckman from Energy Systems Catapult, who will be talking you through some of the ESC's case studies. Over to you, Alex.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, great to be here. So I'm Alex from Energy Systems Catapult. I want to talk to you today about some of the insights that we've developed on kind of consumer-centric grid expansion over the past 10 years or so. If I go to the next slide, please. And so just to start with a few words about the Catapult, who we are. We exist to accelerate net zero energy innovation. We were established by Innovate UK, and really we tackle this from a few different angles. We support SMEs and innovators, but at the same time we also try and develop the tools and the approaches to evolve the wider system into which those innovators are growing into. Now throughout, we've got a lot of different capabilities in the Catapult, but generally it's underpinned by two things. One is whole systems approaches to innovation, and the other one is around consumers and consumer first approaches. And I guess if you go to the next slide, please, question why consumers and from our point of view, consumers are the one set of stakeholders that have a veto over decarbonisation and any kind of grid expansion. So objectively, we have an opportunity to create a better system, a system that works better for consumers. But also we've got to recognise that consumers aren't necessarily rational system actors. They have a complex set of needs and influences on their decision making. And broadly, kind of how we kind of think about it, say, right, if you want to make a change, you've got to account for the inconvenience, that the perceived inconvenience that that change might have to consumers, the risks, the perceived risks that they might be facing, but also the reward. And I guess again, I want to emphasize that this is the perceived reward. And so consumers, I mean, I hate to say it, but consumers don't value a cable. They don't value a substation or a pylon. They don't particularly value a kilowatt hour. They often don't really understand what a kilowatt hour is, but what they really value is what comes out of it. It's the services they get. It's the warmth, it's the security, it's the social interactions that they can have more of with a warm home, and those are the things that they value. And so, just if you go to the next slide, please, just as an example of kind of what we're talking about. Recently, on a project we're doing with Leicestershire called Leicestershire Can, we've been trialing a new approach to kind of tapping into the public discourse around different conversation topics. And we use this approach called social listening, which is essentially where you kind of broadly kind of look at what people are talking about. And just to give an idea about kind of where this kind of sits on public conversation agenda, it's pretty low. Like, it's kind of, when we're talking about net zero, it's kind of in Leicestershire, you had kind of 22,000 mentions as opposed to something like football, 1.3 million. And so, and if you look at the bottom there, this is kind of around the topic of energy at home. There's really a negligible amount of conversation about it until you see some kind of viral social media responses about local stories or national stories, and then things start getting spoken about for a little bit. But broadly, what this is, kind of, there's opportunities here around kind of shaping the wider media narrative to start having that conversation with consumers. But really, we don't necessarily see this approach from our testing of this as replacing more interactive research methods. If we go to the next slide, please. And so two of these research methods that we use within the Catapult are Home Truths Panel and Zero Carbon Vote. So Home Truths Panel is a set of kind of thousands of individuals who are representative of the UK's demographics. And it's a way to really sense check ideas, get a kind of quick pulse test on kind of what your innovation's like and what the consumer response to it is. And then we have the Zero Carbon Vote, which is a online consultation tool that we've used within our local area energy planning processes. So, for example, this chart here is from some of the work we did in Greater Manchester. I think this is specifically Bury in Greater Manchester, where we're basically saying, okay, these consumers within this area were able to vote on what they wanted to happen within their local area. There's lots of interesting stuff came out, but this chart really emphasized for me, it's like, okay, when it comes to kind of infrastructure, let's have a think about kind of why people are engaging. And it's not necessarily the disruption to their street isn't high up on the kind of agenda about why they choose to vote within this kind of survey. And for me, you could interpret this as they don't see that as important, but I don't see it like that. It is important, but what it's really showing is that consumers value other things a lot more. And so if you want to get consumer-centric grid kind of upgrades, then you need to be able to account for what consumers actually value and what they think are important. And so if you go into the next slide, please. So one of these tools help us to understand the rewards, and the rewards need to be something that people value. And when I say value, it's not just about money. It's about more than money. And the perceived reward needs to be sufficient to get kind of public buy-in. So I guess how good would it be if we were able to develop interactions with the energy system whereby people were demanding for their grid to be reinforced, kind of the equivalent of trying to connect to full fiber broadband. It's like the service that you get is so good that you're just waiting for full fiber broadband to come to your local area. And what we've shown through various pieces of work is that kind of the amount of money that we're likely to be able to pass on to consumers isn't going to drive that, I guess, demand for infrastructure that we would like. But there are plenty of opportunities for us as a sector to become even better at understanding what kind of how we can improve outcomes, how we can improve consumers' experiences with the energy system, so that you can start to have this interaction. And one of the ways that we can do this, if we click on, and I'm hoping this next bit works, is within the Catapult we've developed a living lab, and this chart was meant to be nice and interactive, but it's unfortunately not. But you can see this on our website. But essentially, we've got over 5,000 homes linked up to systems within the Catapult. So all their smart meter data is in real time passed to the Catapult. They have homes with heat pumps, homes with EVs, but also homes without any of this. And so it allows us to kind of quickly engage with consumers around particular innovations, and trial these innovations within real homes and see how people react to them. And so this has been a really, really great asset that we've used on various kind of network related projects in the past. But more recently, we've upgraded and added a new facet onto this living lab, which is on the next slide, please, which is called the Whole Energy Systems Accelerator. And this is where we've partnered with the Power Network Demonstration Centre at Strathclyde. So what essentially happens is that we have the real-time data from homes. That real-time data gets sent to PNDC, who are able to simulate real network architectures, and then that passes back to through what we call a kind of an emulator, where we can emulate markets, we can emulate retail propositions, and so in real time you can see the interaction between consumers, any kind of price signals or signals that we send to them, and the impact that has on energy networks. And so this is a really nice and powerful tool to look at that interaction between consumers, their experiences, what they value, and the impacts on networks that are kind of providing those services to them. And so an example of what we've done with West, if you go into the next slide, please, within a project called Neighbourhood Green. This is where we developed a tool to disaggregate smart meter data and to try and calculate after diversity maximum demand in homes for the trial. We monitored homes in the living lab, and then we simulated different penetrations of different penetrations of heat pumps in 1 in 20 events in different network topologies. So a 1 in 20 kind of a stress event where it's kind of particularly cold for a long period of time, for example, to try and understand how different technologies act and behave in homes within these conditions. And what we then did is we modelled transformers, and to understand, okay, how do the loading on those transformers vary with different penetrations of heat pumps. And so that chart on the bottom left is a bit small, but essentially what it says is that in an urban typology, it's kind of as little as 25% penetration of heat pumps could trigger reinforcement requirements if you were designing to 1 in 20 style standard. But we also did had similar-ish kind of results on kind of top oil temperature and winding temperature on those transformers too. And really, if we go into the next slide, this is a good example of the interaction between consumers and resilience. Now, I mean, I'm not going to go into all the stuff in the news recently about resilience, but I think it's a good example about how the design of our networks and the experiences that consumers have in kind of high impact, low probability events can impact upon these kind of the support for grid expansion in general. And so in kind of there are three, and sorry for the simplification here, but if we click on again, please, there are three broad kind of ways that we can develop our networks. We can develop in lockstep. So as demand for electrification goes up, we at the right time in the right location on the network, we reinforce perfectly, and it's all good. We could have the situation where we say we're not going to have any kind of breaching of our potential constraints, and so then if demand is high enough for electrification, which we hope that it would be, and decarbonisation, then we might end up stifling decarbonisation. Or we might have the third one, which is decarbonisation ahead of reinforcement, and that is where kind of potentially some issues might lie in terms of this can happen, but we could be exposing consumers to risk, and so this is and it's quite interesting. There are ways to fill that gap, and one of the challenge areas in this SIF challenge, one of the themes is looking at multi-vector approaches to providing resilience. And one of those areas it could be, for example, hybrid heat pumps. Where in our innovating to net zero analysis, we have ran 3,500 net zero compliant systems that did show that hybrid heat pumps could have a role in the transition, in order to provide that resilience and save kind of cost of the system overall. And if I could go to the next slide, please. And so, but broadly, whether it be a technical or market or a retail proposition, innovation that you're trying to develop, kind of the aim of the game is to really try and scale that as fast as possible whilst minimizing risk to consumers. And from our perspective, kind of on the left-hand side, you've got the fundamental research, you've got the modeling-based stuff, you've got the stuff that doesn't necessarily involve real people, albeit inspired by real people. But then you want to get down to that right-hand side of business as usual. And so you want to step through these kind of different kind of tools. And there are plenty of tools out there, of which kind of the Catapult has a few. And so you can start off with the modeling, like our modeling or kind of ESME or the Home Truths panel, kind of trying to get sense checks from real people. And then you can test them with real people in a safe environment like the Living Lab. And then you can start to introduce simulated networks. And then eventually you want to be able to kind of release into the wild and be able to be confident that there aren't going to be any significant issues that relate to kind of real networks. And so we want increasing, as you go from left to right, it's increasing risk potentially, but also increasing commercial readiness level. And so the aim of the game is to try and decrease that risk. And if on the final slide, please. So just to sum up, this has been a bit of a whistle-stop tour about some of the Catapult's thoughts on consumer-centric grid expansion. But broadly, there are 3 steps to it. Firstly, understand what consumers actually value, and that if you can unlock that value, then it's going to help in the expansion of the grid in order to provide those services to consumers. Secondly, it's about collaboration, because this isn't just a grid problem. This is a grid, this is a retail, this is a market, this is a regulation challenge, that all of these need to work together in order to unlock that value and drive those demands for services. And finally, it's about scaling. How do you scale quickly whilst minimizing risk to consumers? And that is all the time I've got, but thank you very much for listening and look forward to the conversation later.
Thanks so much, Alex, for really, really good insights and how we can really start thinking a bit more about the consumer journey and how we bring innovation in there. Innovation has many different roles to play where the consumers are concerned, and how we untangle some of those bottlenecks. So we'll go to our next speaker, and hopefully my audio is much better. But we have Dr. Angela McOsker, sorry, forgive me, who's the head of innovation from Northumbria Water. So we're very interested to see how we can have a cross-sector approach with innovation as well, and what learnings can be paid from other utilities. So over to you, Angela, and we look forward to seeing what you're going to share.
Good morning, everybody. It's great to be here in this cross-sector audience. So I'm here to share a little bit about the innovation journey that we have at Northumbrian Water and indeed in the UK water sector. So next slide, please. So just in case you don't know who we are a water and sewerage business that serves 4.5 million people across the northeast of England and also water in the Essex and Suffolk region. So a big wave to any of you that are on today who are one of our lovely customers. And we have the brilliant job of supplying water and sewerage services to people. And as I'm sure, like energy, is a very, very valuable and vital service that we need to provide. So the next slide. So in our sector, we have 4 key challenges, and as head of innovation that looks after all of the innovation activities across our business, these are the ones that are really, the big mega trends, if you like. So climate change, this is a really key one for us because this is definitely something that's happening. We are at the receiving end of whenever we have any big storms, much like your own networks. So we need to be looking at how we can be more resilient and reliable going into the future. Probably much like yourselves, we have a lot of aging assets that are not going to be going away anytime soon. So we need to make sure that we can move from grey to green and really use these assets in a great way that provides value and obviously that reliable and resilient service. Changing expectations is a key one. You probably won't fail to have seen in the news over the last year or so that the water companies are under a lot of pressure and scrutiny, and a lot of trust has been dropped. And we need to regain that with our customers. Also, if you look at the pace of digital change in our world, now how we order pizzas, order everything, our customers are expecting our service to be akin to getting a Domino's pizza. So we need to make sure that we are looking at our service offerings to make sure that we can stay in check with that. And then increased demand. So we have more and more people wanting our lovely services. You'll probably see where you live, lots of houses popping up. Businesses are wanting more and more water, and we only have a finite amount of it. So we need to make sure that we really use the amount of water that we have very, very carefully and work very closely with our customers to make sure that that happens. Next slide, please. So at Northumbrian Water, to make sure that innovation is baked into everything that we do, it is actually one of the core values of our business. So this is not some sort of side hustle activity for a small number of us. This is baked in to everybody's job. We want everybody to be curious about what they do and for us all to look at it to see how we can make things better, more efficient, and deliver more for our customers. So the next slide, please. We take our role of doing innovation very seriously at Northumbrian Water. But one of the things that we do is we want to do things slightly differently. And one of the ways in which that we have found to do that is by creating the Innovation Festival. So this is a way in which we can bring innovation to a large number of our employees, but very importantly to a large number of other people as well. So we've been doing this now for, it'll be year 9 this year. And we use the design sprint methodology within the business anyway to see how we can come up with new ideas and whittle through these ideas quite quickly to see which ones have got the biggest potential and the most impact. So this is the Google Ventures version of Design Sprint is the one that we use. It was created by Jake Knapp. And basically, we start with a challenge on day 1. We unpack it. We really understand what is the root cause and what we are trying to fix. And then we ideate going through a number of different exercises across the week. By Thursday, we are testing with our customers and prototyping to really make sure that we've got a strong minimum viable product. So by Friday, we actually have something that we can use and run with at speed. Across all of the different processes that we have set up, it really is all around asking what are those killer questions, what are the things that are going to get in the way of being able to do this, so then we can actually identify those barriers very quickly in order to see whether we can move forward or not. And the festival is the place at which we do this at scale. We, in year 1, had 6 different sprints. In year 8 last year, we had 50. So we have grown considerably over that time. And if you do go on to that next slide, I can share some numbers around the impact of this. So as I said, we've had 8 festivals so far, and I think that the most striking thing about this is us being able to attract so many people. So it happens at a race course in Newcastle. It is a tented village, and it has provided an opportunity by which we can democratize innovation and create a really lovely environment where people actually want to collaborate with each other. It really is open innovation at its best. What it does is we value all of the individuals. It doesn't matter the background that they have. And you can see on the slide there, we have about 45 different sectors attending. And this is really important for innovation, because I'm very convinced that the solutions that I have to my challenges are already out there in another sector. I just need to be able to find them, or they need to be able to walk through the doors of Northumbrian. So the festival provides a brilliant opportunity for us to see what other people have got, because a lot of our challenges are the same, whether it be around what we do with our customers, what we do with things flowing through pipes, what we do with infrastructure. So we can all benefit from collaborating together. The very exciting thing as well, over 40 different countries, and this really came about due to COVID. One of the positive things that I would say came out of that in that year, we decided that rather than not doing anything, that we would actually digitize all of the key parts of our festival. So here we really adopted Miro, a digital whiteboarding tool. I think we were the top 3 user in that particular week. And obviously, like Zoom and all the rest of it that we're all very familiar with now, but back in the day, it was something that was pretty novel. And what happened when we opened those digital doors, we didn't know what was going to happen, but what did happen was that the globe walked through those doors. So now we're keeping those doors firmly open and really want to make sure that we are embracing what is going on around the globe as well, because for sure, some of the solutions that we have are cited somewhere else. We also have this opportunity to really grow the culture within our business. So we have about 25% of our employees actually at the event. And as a consequence of all of this, we have lots of different ideas. And what we've seen year on year is that the potential value of those innovation ideas coming out of the festival are growing and growing. So last year, the potential value of the top 10 ideas that came out were well over £100 million per year, if successful. And I guess coming on to if it's successful, one of the key things that we have tried to build at Northumbrian, and definitely at the festival, is a culture where failure is okay. And this has to be something that we are okay with if we work in innovation, because not everything will go right. Because if you know the answer, then you don't need to run it as an innovation project. It's business as usual. So having that appetite for risk and that willingness to try things that perhaps we don't know is actually okay. And we kind of feel comfortable with a success rate of about 1 in 4 of our projects. And at the moment in our pipeline, we've probably got about 145 different innovation projects. But we also have some good successes under our belt. Otherwise, none of this would certainly be reaching year 9 of this year. So if we go on to the next slide. I think it's also really important to highlight that everything that comes out of the festival is definitely things from the very homemade, which is you can see in the top left and top right. You probably have no idea what those are. They look like medieval torture devices, but actually they are very useful. And what we do is we put them into drains to identify which way wipes are coming, so then we can target a customer campaign to try and encourage customers only to put the 3 P's down the toilet: paper, pee and poo, and certainly not pythons, bras, sweatshirts, false teeth, or any of the other peculiar things that end up at our sewerage works. But what we found is our Bin the Wipe campaign, when targeted, helped by being helpful by those devices, has been able to reduce the amount of flooding in those areas by 50%, which is just amazing. And those devices were actually the creation of some of our employees, which we very much encourage everybody to be actively involved. We also then go to the very high tech, such as 3D cement printing, drones to go and do remote water quality, digital twins, and then the bottom left is an incredible bioreactor filled with algae, which is another way we're remediating wastewater sludge. So we're very inventive, and we embrace everything that comes across our path. So the next slide, please. These are just a number of the game-changing projects that we've had. Year on year, we have incredible projects that come through. And just like this, the SIF funding mechanism that you have in energy, we have an equivalent in water. We have the Ofwat Innovation Fund. And what we've found is that the Innovation Festival has been a brilliant place to establish some of those projects, to create consortia, to go after that very valuable funding that enables us to do innovation projects that we wouldn't ordinarily be able to do. If you go on to the next slide, I thought I would just share a number of those different projects that have come out of the festival. So the first one is the National Underground Asset Register. So this might seem like something quite obvious, but before this time, nobody was able to get this idea off the floor. And what this project sought to do was, whenever anybody is going to dig up a road, so whether it be gas, electric, comms, water, you're digging blind. So those guys, they might have some rough plans. Those plans are never always as they seem, and this means that you can have an accidental strike that can actually cause death, which is clearly something that everybody wants to avoid. Harm in any way, again, we don't want that to happen. And we also do not want to have our customers disadvantaged and put have problems in their neighborhood. That does not go down well. So we want to be able to do the job as slickly as we can. So knowing what's under the ground helps with that. So in our very first festival, this came out of a number of tents because it was clearly a brilliant idea. In the second festival, no real progress had been made that year, and we identified the key things that were causing that slowness. And one of those was the data sharing agreement that just was very, very difficult to get over. So what we did in the second festival is that we put the lawyers in the tent and would not let them out till we had that data sharing agreement, which indeed did happen. And we also mapped a small part of Sunderland to show that it could happen. Since then, the government then sponsored a £400 million project that enabled us to be able to map the north of England and London. And since then, this is now a product which is live. It has over 300 companies and over 700 different buried assets in there. So it means that we now have an opportunity to see what is under there, and this is now there for everybody to use. So if this is of interest, then please get in touch and we can show you how to do it. This is also highly lucrative to the UK. They estimated it was worth about 3.2 billion to UK PLC. So very, very valuable as well in terms of time saved and efficiency. So on to the next example, which is a little bit more customer focused. So again, this came out of an innovation festival. And as we all know, we are all wanting to develop low carbon ways forward. We want to have this pathway to net zero, but this is quite difficult for customers in households, especially those in vulnerable or low income households. So what we did in partnership with Northern Gas Networks, Newcastle University, Procter & Gamble and National Energy Action is that we formed this project that then was a successful winner of the Ofwat Innovation Fund and managed to secure £2 million to be able to identify a number of different energy and water efficiency opportunities for households, whether that be technology or other. And we have retrofitted over 50 households in the northeast of England, so we can actually then gather data on these low energy devices or low water devices, and also very importantly get the customer thought on these devices, because we definitely need to do this in tandem with our customers, get them on board, understand their feedback. Otherwise, these things will not be adopted. So we'll be running a version of this, looking at recirculating showers at the festival this year. Should you be interested in this project, I'd be very happy to point you in the right direction and get you the information needed. But this highlights the opportunity that we have of working in tandem with customers to really be able to create this fair transition to net zero and really get more households involved. The next slide, please. And the last one I'm going to leave you with, because we are running out of time, is just about how we can really help our vulnerable customers. And this is a brilliant project that has now been in existence for a number of years and made quite a lot of progress. And this is really getting our customers onto that priority service register, because whether they are water or energy poor, then we need to help them. So again, this is a great opportunity for us to collaborate across water and energy and really help customers. So I've run out of time. I can see that I'm being eyeballed. So if there's anything I can provide more information on, please do get in touch. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Angela, and apologies for me having to be that guy.
No, that's okay.
Really, really good insights, and good to see some of those consumer voices again coming through to innovation, unique sort of opportunities through the festival. I think we have a lot that we can pull from in the energy space from that. So really good to see. We're now going to go to our final speaker, who is far up north. So Francis Simmons, social scientist at Atlantic 58, is going to give us some insights on how we can, again, bring that consumer voice a little bit more in the work that we do. So over to you, Francis.
Thanks, Marcel, and thanks to Alex and Angela for those presentations as well. I would like to just present a case study and introduce you to a process that we're developing in fairly early stages relating to social impact assessment in islands and highly rural areas. We're working with the University of the Highlands and Islands on this project, who I'll talk about a little bit in a second. But our work basically revolves around a few relevant topics to this webinar, including the consumer experience of impacts arising from development in isolated and highly rural locations, consumer engagement processes, and what they reveal about values and attitudes to climate change adaptation infrastructure. So we can move on to the next slide. So a little bit about us. We're an environmental consultancy based in the Isle of Lewis. That's in the Outer Hebrides in Scotland. Most of our work is quite local. We work across the Highlands and Islands, delivering project design, EIA, SIA, which is social impact assessment, and environmental management. We're working with various partners, including industry, the community, and academia as well. And you may know there's a specific type of small-scale farming up here, so we work in that field as well. And if we just bring up the map, in case anyone isn't familiar with where we are, that's us up in the far northwest of Scotland. And I know probably people will have a few ideas about this part of the world. So if you think about Scottish Islands, probably there are various things that come to mind. But to set the scene, for anyone who's not familiar with this area, we're a highly rural, sometimes referred to as remote region, known for the scenery and cultural heritage, including the Gaelic language and culture, various religious minorities, and we're sort of seen as being on the periphery. So we're often referred to as remote or peripheral, but there's very much a sort of sense of being geographically at the sort of center of something, maybe the Atlantic Ocean, and we have a lot in common with the Nordic countries and the other islands, Shetland, Orkney, And yeah, so our location means obviously we're not sheltered from the storms in the Atlantic. So we've been identified, this area is quite a hotspot for renewables. However, the grid expansion aims up here face a number of challenges. So we can move on to the next slide. Okay, so our research partner has come through Innovate UK. We were paired up via an innovation voucher last year. We're working with the Centre for Living Sustainably, which is based in Inverness. And their specialisation is in inclusive sustainable development, challenging inequalities, and creative participatory engagement with community. And that's our research lead, Dr. Sarah Wagner. We've also got Ewan Bowditch and Lalith Wellamadej, who've contributed to the first stage of the research as well. I'll move on quickly because I haven't got a huge amount of time. And I really want to talk about the challenge that we're trying to develop a solution for. So our work is based around social science approaches to inform EIA. So we're looking at social impacts of developments, and we're trying to meet the guidance that suggests that we should be using social science theory and place-based approaches rather than a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to understanding social impacts, particularly from large-scale developments. And to do these, we're also working with community. So we're trying to develop, part of the methodology that we're looking at developing includes the ways that we engage with community. So there's often a few challenges to assessing social impacts. I think generally they're seen as hard to quantify, which can lead to assessments that might be overly focused on aspects such as the economic impacts from projects. Engagement can also be seen as expensive and difficult to manage. And on top of this, we've got specific kind of challenges associated with islands and highly rural areas, where challenges like connectivity issues, limited service provision, infrastructure vulnerability, and the potential impact that large-scale inward migration can have cause impacts to play out differently in this type of environment. And less tangibly, but also influencing how impacts and attitudes are formed, are the contextual factors, such as cultural marginality, the historical context, how development has been carried out in the past, also land ownership patterns and power relations, so connections between people, and how damage to community cohesion can actually have much wider effects in these types of communities than they might on a mainland setting. So if we move on to the next slide. So onto what we're trying to develop. It's a social impact methodology which accounts for those challenges, basically. So we're aiming to be holistic, participatory, and use a place-based approach. So understand where we are and use those specific factors to guide how we assess impacts. Ultimately, we want to create greater resilience in quite fragile communities, both in terms of energy resilience, but also empowerment and trust. Okay, and the next slide. I suppose in terms of the objectives, the kind of objectives that might be of interest to the industry are related to number one, the benefit to consumers. So if we understand the impacts better, then we're better able to avoid or mitigate them appropriately, and also judge what the community benefits should be. We are aiming to involve multiple stakeholders, so not just communities, but industry, local stakeholders, local businesses, the supply chain, and also other consultants, because we'd like this process that we develop eventually to be used in similar contexts to our own. And finally, offering value for money. You can save costs by avoiding poor design choices that could have been worked out earlier in the process, and the resulting kind of community opposition or other problems arising later. Okay, to next slide. So what we've done so far is the first stage of this project. So we're aiming to develop a whole kind of process, a longitudinal process for assessing social impacts that's EIA compliant. The first step has been achieved through an innovation voucher, which created our link with UHI. And in that part of the project, we carried out various workshops, focus groups and interviews with local residents and other stakeholders, and also quite a thorough lit review to understand the context as completely as possible. And from that, we've got a draft set of criteria for assessing receptor sensitivity. So looking at population aspects of what makes up the population here, whether it's health or use of the outdoors or the sort of the economy in this area, and the different types of features that can create greater or less kind of resilience in an island environment. And we've got a report on that, and also a huge amount of data for our future stages. We mainly, the richest data came out of the focus groups and interviews that we carried out, which revealed attitudes kind of in line with what we expected based on the lit review and the local context, particularly in relation to how people connect with their environment, and the importance of the landscape to various aspects of social life, well-being and identity. Can move on to the last couple of slides and I'll wind up. So just, yeah, the next steps, we're looking at basically testing out these criteria that we've developed, and we'll be seeking feedback through various conferences and meetings with people locally as well as more widely in the industry, and then actually applying those criteria to EIA chapters for island-based projects. And finally, on a more longitudinal sort of level, on the next slide, we are looking towards the strategies for participatory engagement. So when is engagement carried out, with whom and how, and can those be adapted to the kinds of context that we're based in? So exploring digital tools, but also thinking about non-digital tools, depending on the context. And then further ahead, and the very fuzzy at the moment, is thinking about how we monitor social impacts in the long term, while also engaging with community members. So thanks very much. I'd be intrigued to hear any questions, and whether this relates to anyone's experience, or it's made anything more complicated, or a problem more concrete than it was 10 minutes ago. Thanks very much, Marcel.
Thanks so much, Francis, and that's great. Don't worry, questions are good things. Speaking of questions, we're going to move into Q&A. So if all speakers can come on. Thank you for your comment, though, David, in the Q&A about Veterans Day. Definitely one of those things with scheduling webinars, the intricacies definitely flare up. I hope everyone was able, in their own time, to get that moment of silence. If we can have speakers camera on and we can jump into some questions that have come through. Still some time to sneak some questions in. So if you have any for the panel, we have roughly until 1:15 for this Q&A session, so we can tackle some of those. Want to start with probably pairing some from Simon Stromberg, where we're looking at
probably a twofold question on how do we target consumers effectively. Obviously, they're very different clusters of consumers in terms of their interests and how we communicate with them and how we engage them. So that's one question, if anybody has any ideas of innovation space there or best practices. And then the other one is around the innovation in particular. What are the areas of innovation that we need to focus more on? We've seen some things come through where we're looking at, is it the visual impacts that we're trying to have with our innovations? Is it innovation largely in the engagement? So maybe if anybody has any ideas on what's missing in this space from an innovation standpoint, could be both technical or otherwise, that would be interesting to hear. I'll open the floor. Maybe I can pick on someone. This is the fun part. Alex, you give me a smile. So I'm going to pick on you and see if you wanted to tackle any of those.
Yeah, I think the one about, I guess, variations in consumer types and whether kind of one's service for one type of consumer can be the same, kind of be right service for other consumers. And I mean, broadly, I think the question is set up for an easy answer of no, they are not the same people. But I think it leads to a broader question for the energy sector about how we engage with the consumers and how we tailor our engagement to different types of consumers, and recognizing that there are not just kind of 4 or 5 categories of consumers, but loads and loads. And I think there's a good kind of question to be had about kind of comparing to other sectors and looking at how other sectors engage with different consumer segments, and how they look to actively understand consumer segments to tailor propositions to them that those consumers will value. And so when you look at, say, like it's kind of, I don't know, social media or something, they're getting down to consumer segments of 1, and that's more than likely not going to work for the energy sector. But you can see from where we are now, where we kind of have quite limited consumer segments recognized within our existing processes, compared to that kind of high innovation kind of environment, there's probably somewhere in between that would work better than here. So the question is really, okay, how do we then develop our retail markets? How do we develop our regulatory systems in order to drive the innovation that can kind of start to kind of open up niches in consumer segments and target propositions at those consumers? And so kind of from our perspective, there are various things we can do, and it goes hand in hand with kind of strategies for planning and grid expansion. And so one example might be around making kind of regulations a little less onerous for innovators who are trying to target certain groups, but also making more data open in order to allow a quicker kind of rapid understanding of consumers across different segments for innovators. So I think the answer to the question is no, they're not the same, but there's a more difficult answer, which is, okay, then how do we then tailor services to different people and the values that different people have?
Thanks. Francis, Angela, anything to add on that?
We create personas, recognizing that people are different, so then we can then target different groups with different messages that hopefully might hit. But customers love being part of being consulted, being part of the journey. And at the festival, we have a fan zone, and our customers love being part of that. So it definitely works, involving people as early as you can.
Well, I have a question on the festival, so I'll come back to you on that after. But Francis, I don't know if you had anything to top or tailor that.
Yeah, I think I would echo what Angela said about going in as early as possible in the process, at a strategic stage if possible. I think people's experiences of consultation can vary across different geographies. There's probably quite a sense of consultation fatigue in certain parts of the country, and definitely up here. So thinking about who are the kind of key representatives that might give you a diverse set of perspectives, and also thinking about power relations in communities, sort of who usually gets asked what they think, and who else might there be who have an equally valid perspective.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking in Scotland we have community councils, who are a great route into understanding communities' perspectives on infrastructure and quite deep understanding of their landscapes and their own history. So.
And a tricky one for speakers is particularly which areas of innovation focus should we have? I mean, if we're looking at the meteoric rise of AI and putting that into consumer segmentation and then channeling those analytics into better delivery of how we go about our energy, what other sort of ideas do you think we need to have more focus on in innovation where consumers are concerned? Open to anyone.
So I think, I mean, just jumping on the AI theme, that is one of several tools that can help us better understand consumers. But hopefully, from my presentation, it's clear that it's not necessarily the nirvana, because that social listening that we did, there's a bit of kind of high tech stuff in there. Not focused on AI, but there's a bit of AI in there, and it kind of, we don't think that it replaces that active consultation with the consumers, the direct engagement with consumers. But I think there is innovations about how we can do that more quickly, and how we can do that because I think what we need now is a fairly rapid evolution of the approach to expanding the grid and by nature of that, expanding our understanding of consumers. And so hopefully there are tools like AI or like online tools or that can help us do that.
And on top of that, when we're looking at consumers, we're looking at how do we actually even physically or visually engage with our energy system. You know, my background says it all with pylons. But, you know, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on one of the questions that have come in there as well on the visual impact that energy systems have on consumers, and if you know of any novel ideas that are coming through.
It's certainly a very relevant topic in the Highlands and Islands, and I'm sure communities would welcome innovation related to visual impact. I think it's probably one of the biggest barriers to community acceptance of the grid expansion. I don't know anything about the technology involved. I'm afraid that's not my field.
That's all right. It's a very important but challenging area that solutions are quite tricky. If we move over to, just in the interest of time, if we move over to one of the questions from Charles in the chat, looking at prosumer roles and grid optimization, I think from my viewpoint, yes, that's exactly a sort of innovation space. If we're looking at how we can get that connectivity to reduce the strain on the grid. Joe, I don't know if you've seen that question come in, if you have anything to add there, or any other speaker.
Just putting comments in the chat on that one so I can finish typing.
All right.
If you, yeah.
Okay.
I could, yeah. So I think that this relationship between consumers, prosumers, grid reinforcement, and expansion is an interesting one, and from our perspective, prosumers have a great role to play. One thing I didn't talk about is something that was referenced in the challenge theme, which is the smart local energy systems and the Prospering from the Energy Revolution program, which we worked on, where there was a lot of good innovations there that were using various different technologies to support the interactions between consumers and local areas. But I guess one thing to kind of bear in mind when we're thinking about this is your size of your grid is going to be specified by the kind of a kind of peak condition of some definition, and so the behavior of your prosumers within those peak conditions is what we really kind of want to kind of look at, because if the whatever solution that exists is being proposed doesn't account for those peak conditions, then you still have this kind of a similar-ish grid challenge, or you have a changing in interactions with with consumers at those peak times. And so, yeah, I would say that consumers are very important, and it's in multiple ways, but we just got to bear in mind those peaks.
Thanks so much, Alex. And just coming back to you, Angela, on a specific one, asking, and it probably ties again to, what we do and sort of the KPIs around that, and seeing how it actually translates into whether we're getting consumers more on board and the trust and recognition. So there's a question there on that, which says, do you track the effect of the festival on customer trust and company recognition?
I was just busy typing a response to.
I keep chiming in at the wrong times. You're all busy typing away, and I'm asking you questions.
Yeah, so yes, of course, we do measure the impact of the festival in terms of our all of the articles, comms in the landscape that we have. I would say that all water companies are not the same, and we are actually industry leading for our interaction with customers. So for CMEX, we are number one in the industry, which we are hugely proud of and work very, very hard to get there. And for sure, the shine of things like the festival will rub off. We actually do have a fan zone at the festival, so we do get customers actively involved with our innovation work, which I think does help to build trust and to have that transparency with what we're doing.
Thanks, Angela. Okay, so we can thank you so much, speakers. I know you've taken time out of your day to come here to speak about these different issues where consumers are concerned. So we really do thank you for making time today to share some of your insights. We will move on to the next part of our webinar, which is the problem statements exercise. So somebody else that I'm going to chime in and bother is Matt Hastings, who is going to come in and tell you, I'll give you a little bit of a showcase on the Ideonomy platform and how we can use that within these webinar and ideation series to really sort of focus in on where innovation can really start to flourish. Matt, over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Masao. So I'm conscious that I am keeping everyone from their lunch. So we are going to move at speed and at scale. And for those who haven't been part of an Ideonomy before, welcome to the next sort of 10 minutes or so. So apologies, I don't have access to the Q&A for some Teams related reason, but hopefully you've got the link here on the slide. For those who haven't had a chance to get logged into the platform, now is your chance to get logged in. Remember that 14-digit password. It doesn't need any numbers or @ signs, just can be letters. And this is a really, really interactive, fast-paced next 10 minutes or so. So I'm just going to share my screen now and sort of take you into the Ideonomy for the SIF and just show you kind of what this is all about. So hopefully you can see this okay. What we've got here is essentially a problem book. There's 118 problems in this problem book, and they've all been added in by members of the academic community historically, but we're now really laser focused on everyone in this call. I think, like Angela said during her talk, this is about the democratization of innovation, and we're trying to capture your perspective. So every individual on this call, I imagine, will have a problem related to consumer-centric grid solutions that you want the SIF to solve. We are looking for really big, bold, ambitious problems, which translate to big, bold, ambitious ideas and therefore projects. But the activity here is really to try and capture as many problems in the next 7 minutes as we possibly can. So how does it work? All you need to do is basically a few different things. So you can come in and search the problem book up here and look for an existing problem, that you might share with someone else who's already put it in. If it is already in there, what you can do is essentially interact with it with a number of different ways. So, if I pick some maybe problems down here to do with, say, agricultural communities to manage demand on the rural grid, what you can do is essentially vote to prioritize on the problem. So that's what the thumbs are. Thumbs up is yes, this is important. Thumbs down is no, this is not important. And then the other things you can do is vote to collaborate on each individual problem statement. So what we will do with this data is give it back to the SIF team sort of towards the end of June, and they will use that data to pull you guys into conversations around potential project consortia. So this insight is all being shared with the SIF team. If I say come down to a problem like this, like advanced manufacturing for high reliability energy sector components, you'll see some of these problems have chevrons. And what we have here is main problem with different sub problems. So we're trying to help the SIF team to understand the different components of these problem sets. And if you click on view problem details, there's a few different things you can do here. So each problem has essentially a discussions forum around it. So you can come in and add questions and comments here and be like, actually, that's not an important problem at all, and this is why, or this problem has already been solved, have a look at this, that, and the other. So you can interact with the problems that are already there. But the key thing now is we want to go from 118 problems to 200 problems in the next 5 minutes. There's 71 people on this call. So if everyone submits a problem, or a few people submit a couple of problems, that's how we will get to that number. Don't submit incremental kind of like how might we ... type problems. Think transformational, big, bold, strategic stuff. So if you want to add a problem in, it's very, very easy. You just go up to that add problem button in the top right. And then all you have to do is essentially put in your problem title. So this is, I won't add this in, it's just an example. How might we foster community-led microgrids? You then ask the AI in Ideonomy to complete the problem with AI. And what will happen within a few seconds is essentially it will generate a full problem statement for you. You can come in and edit this if you want. Have a quick read of your problem statement, make sure that AI hasn't, gone completely crazy. And all you do is pop it under a theme. So the themes for this discussion are obviously consumer-centric grid solutions. There are other themes related to a few other SIF challenges. Just ignore those for the time being. And then you've got two options. You either hit publish, and if you publish that problem, it will go on the Ideonomy and anyone can interact with it, prioritize it, chat to you about it, etc. Or you can move to subproblem creation. So if you move to subproblem creation, this is an experimental feature, but you can use AI to create subproblems. Now, sometimes this works brilliantly and gives you 3 to 7 sort of subproblems related to your main problem. Each subproblem has a problem statement, or sometimes it returns an error and says, oh, this is a hard nut to crack. It takes about 60 seconds. There's some smart things happening in the back end. Refining the problem statements, etc., etc. But this basically then leads to the option to publish the full problem and the subproblems. I'm being deliberately fast-paced because I know Masao is going to come and kick me in the shins if I run over the 10-minute allocation. But if you can now start to access the platform and add your problems in, that would be fantastic. So you can see there it returned a hard nut to crack. And then we will leave this open and for the next few weeks. So feel free to share this with your community. If there are innovators or academics or policymakers, regulators, investors, who you feel have a particular view around this challenge, and they understand the really novel problems that are related to consumer-centric grid, then please do get them to add their problems into this. And then, like I say, at the end of this exercise, all of this data goes back to Joe and the team, and they can start to fold it into the next stages of ideation. So we'll see how things are going so far. So currently we're still at 118. Maybe I was a little bit ambitious to try and get to 200 within 7 minutes, but hopefully you can see how the platform works. And please do continue to add your problems in to help the SIF team really work out which problems are going to lead to really high impact, high ambitious projects. There's only one other thing to point out is that this trending problem section here is essentially the ranking that has happened to date. So we've had this open for a few weeks prior to this. Your reactions, up thumbs and down thumbs and votes and things, they all feed into this trending problem section. So this is dynamic. It changes based on the views of the community, but this is really your chance to be heard. It's your chance to add your problems in and do that at speed and at scale. So I'm running out of time. I will hand back to Masao to wrap us up, but hopefully that was useful. Masao, back to you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Don't worry, I never kick shins on a Thursday, so you're all safe. That was really helpful. We're going to keep that open so you can keep putting your problem statements, but we're not actually going to hear from me now. We're going to hear from Joe, who's going to give us a sort of forward outlook on where we're going to next.
Yeah, thanks very much, Masao. Can I have next slide, please? So, as mentioned, just on the ideonomy piece, so we're using ideonomy on challenges 1, 3, and 7 of the round 5 challenges. And as Matt mentioned, this is to the end of June, so the ideonomy platform's open for you to engage with. And we'll be sending a link as follow-up from this webinar to everyone that's registered. And if you want to engage in identifying problem statements and putting them into the sort of ideonomy platform and upvoting, importantly, any problem statements or downvoting where you think they're less relevant. It's mainly around the problem statement focus. So it's really useful for us to understand where there is appetite for collaboration, really high engagement on specific problem statements and where we can focus effort. On the slide here, you can see the ideation events planned across now and September. So we had our first webinar last week. Recordings are being made of these webinars and slides shared with attendees that are registered. The recording from this webinar will be going up into that playlist as well. And we've got a follow-up workshop on this consumer-centric grid expansion challenge happening at Utility Week Live in Birmingham in 2 weeks' time. We have our Challenge 1 webinar happening on 5th of June, and then a follow-up workshop happening online on the 18th of June. There's more details in the last couple of slides on how to register for those. And then we've got a break over summer of July and August on ideation events, workshops, webinars, where we'll then resume in September on green gas and whole system optimization, so challenges 6 and 7 from the round 5 challenges. That's not to say that ideation stops over summer. We are planning to support collaboration, engagement with innovators, third parties, and consortia building off the back of those first 3 workshops and webinars where we've got clear problem statements, appetite for collaboration, and help foster those potential consortia. Can I have the next slide, please? Just in that link from webinars into workshops, we want the webinars like the one we've had today to help provide sort of foundational understanding around the challenge, identify some key stakeholders and ecosystem players that are important within the challenge, have some clear objectives and expectations on the challenge, and start thinking about priority areas and problems. And we've seen some of that in the Q&A, and also in ideonomy, hopefully the participation can help identify where there is scope for new SIF proposals to form around, and also give some of the sort of key tools and frameworks. And I think that the speaker panel that we've had today has really helped set some of those sort of social science perspectives, previous case studies from the water sector, and some foundational principles for thinking about how you can address this particular challenge on consumer-centric grid expansion. We then move that into the workshop. So the sort of input from ideonomy and also from the Q&A is really useful to see where there is priority areas and where we could form potential consortia. So the workshop is definitely a follow-on from the webinar and the participation we've had. So we're looking for that workshop to move into the next step of going from problem statements and then looking to generate innovative ideas, potential solutions, bring key third parties, networks together for new consortia and partnerships, deepen that understanding and where there is gaps that need addressing, and identify high potential project concepts that we can then support in that follow-up after the workshops happened, of fostering those collaborations and helping them develop. Now, next slide, please. On the slide here, you can see the details for the next 2 workshops that we've got. So we're at All Energy next week in Glasgow. On day 1, we've got a workshop on our challenge challenge 3 on high energy demand point integration. And then we've got the follow-up workshop from this challenge on consumer-centric grid expansion happening at Utility Week Live in Birmingham. The QR codes will be sent around. In addition, if you don't manage to snap them here. If I can have next slide, please. I mentioned earlier about lots of resources from the SIF to engage with us. On the slide here, you can see a number of these. I'll highlight in the bottom right our expression of interest. So if you've got an idea or you're a third party interested in engaging with the SIF team on any of the round 5 challenges, either with an idea or you've got expertise, that QR code is best placed to engage with the SIF team through our innovation or commercial squads to engage on an idea and see where we can help you take that. If I can have next slide, please. I think I'm handing back to Marcel.
Thanks so much, Joe. So that's the end of the webinar, and we've come to a close. Thank you so much for joining us, for understanding where we can learn from different sectors, what points of innovation we can really have where consumers are concerned, the overall SIF process of translating some of these ideas into actual projects, and the other stages of ideation that we do have so that we get more of those focal areas. The last step needed, because you will have a continued journey of problem statements afterwards in the Ideonomy platform. But the last step needed is we could pop that phone out, we can take a a photo of the QR code, take you to a link and give us feedback. It really helps us shape these future webinars and workshops to better support the ideation process and support potential innovators and those trying to collaborate around these problems. We've popped a link as well in the Q&A, section, if that is a more preferable means of getting to the form, but that would be greatly appreciated. And aside of that, thank you so very much for joining us here today. We are going to have the next webinar and workshop. We have those links there. If you've missed it and you would like us to give you further information, by all means, get in touch and we'll be happy to see you there. So thank you again to all the speakers. Thank you, Joe and the SIF team. And we wish you a lovely week and weekend when it comes. Bye, everyone.